Sure. Mm, it's okay. Good evening. Morning.
Hello, Abe. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, you will be here shortly.
No problem.
Mm.
Good.
Hello, Abe.
All right.
Hi, Benny.
Hello, Mario.
How are you?
Baruch Hashem.
How's your wife doing?
All right.
Good. That's good.
I hear Anna's around and kicking.
Hmm?
Anna's
Say
providing the
again?
background music, right?
What? I
Nothing.
didn't hear what you said.
Sounds like Anna's in the background.
Oh, you hear that? I don't know. She's not in this room, and the doors are closed. Your ears are perfect. I don't know what she's not. Hi, Chaim.
Hello.
Walter, you're in the dark.
I'm always in the dark. That's my problem in life.
No,
You don't know that?
I didn't. Page 193, Walter.
I got it. I saw your note. Actually, I have it on the page from last time. You know, Mario,
Yes?
Rabbi Segelman went to Israel for the day, or 2 days, to be
Why?
Menachem Oval, the people who passed away.
Walter, you should look. He sent a very nice email.
I got the email. Of
That
course,
was
I got it.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know that.
beautiful email. That's such a beautiful
Yeah.
thing to do. That's like amazing what he did. Really amazing. So sad, the whole thing.
Yeah. But I don't think I got an email.
I'm sure you got an email. We got
Who paid for his ticket?
it. It wasn't me, Chaim, if that's what you want to know. I don't know.
Good evening, everybody.
Why are you looking for the same sponsor, Chaim?
Page are we on?
No comment.
193?
Right.
193.
193, Hilchas Tfilas Shabbos. Mincha of Erev Shabbos. In the previous chapters, we studied the halachot related to the first stages of Shabbos, preparing for Shabbos, Kabbalah Shabbos, Hadlakas Neighbor Shabbos. In the next two shiurim, we will study another very important aspect of Shabbos that even many of those who study Hilchos Shabbos in detail do not necessarily learn, the tefillos. We will focus primarily on those aspects that differ from the regular weekday tefillos, beginning with Mincha recited at Erev Shabbos. Mincha recited on Friday is mostly similar to that recited during the rest of the week. But as noted by the tour, during Mincha on Friday afternoon, one, of course, does not recite Tachnun. Umispalin filas mincha, k'mo b'shari mosachol. Elo she'ein noiflim al pneiam, we don't say Tachnun. Why is Tachnun omitted? In his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, the Vilna Gaon refers to a ruling in the Gemara in the Masechta Moed Katan concerning the relaxing of morning practices on Erev Shabbos, even before Shabbos itself begins. Like when somebody's sitting Shiva, and already by 2 PM they get up from Shiva. Evidently, some of the status of Shabbos is in force even before the onset of Shabbos. It says Moed Katan to Rabban Meimesai Zoik v'Nesamitos Berev Shabbos. They used to overturn their beds, as we don't really do that practice today, but then they would turn their beds upright. When do they do that? Already from the time of Mincha. The Levush explains explicitly that Tachanun is omitted because Friday's Mincha is recited right before Shabbos. Does the Levush imply that Tachanun is omitted only if Mincha is recited just before Shabbos, but if Mincha is recited in the early afternoon, then it would be recited? The Mishnah Berurah writes that Tachanun is omitted even when prays at the time of Mincha Gedola, which is 6.5 hours. Let's say the day was 6, let's say sunrise was 6 a.m. and sunset was 6 p.m. So the 6th hour of the day would start at 12 o'clock. So Mincha Gedola is 6.5, so it's 12:30. So the Mishnah Berurah, even if you recite it in the early afternoon, you would not say Mincha. Tachna. Kosova prima godim. Nira. Du adin kishmipal mincha gdol achar chatzos nami enofim apneim. V'chein mi shoichel pas achar chatzos. Gam kein ein loimer al naros bavel kim shir malis. During the weekday, when you bench, instead of on a Shabbos or Yontif, where you say shir malis, you describe the morning of Klal Yisrael al narot bavel. So if somebody ate bread Friday afternoon and you benched, you should already start saying shir malis and not al naros bavel Friday afternoon. The above halachos reflect the basic elevated status of Friday afternoon as a period of time that leads into Shabbos. Accordingly, Friday afternoon can be viewed inherently as a time of transition. In addition, as was discussed at length in the previous year, there's a mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos, to accept the sanctity of Shabbos early. For this reason, the Shmir Shabbos Ilchosa writes that one should recite Mincha V'Erev Shabbos with enough time to accept Shabbos at least a few minutes before sunset. Some people are accustomed to reciting additional prayers or passages before Mincha on Friday afternoon. The Aruch HaShulchan cautions that a person must not allow all the additional recitations to delay his recitation of Mincha itself past its own acceptable time. Like, to daven all the way into Shkia. You want to finish before Shkia so you can accept Shabbos a few minutes before Shkia, which we said is the minimum. Technically, you want to accept Shabbos even before, as we learned. Says the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, "Am ispalot tfilas mincha b'tzibur yishtadel sheyispalot ba'od moed." You want to make sure that there's enough time. Da'ainu she'efshar yeh lekabel Shabbos l'achos zman muad lefnei hashkia. We learned in the previous shiurim that opinions differ as to the proper practice. One cannot finish mincha more than a few minutes before sunset. However, even if there is still time left to recite mincha, if an individual arrives at the synagogue after the congregation has already accepted upon themselves to begin Shabbos, it would be problematic for him to recite mincha v'erev Shabbos amidst them. That's why you see some of us, when we come into shul late, we don't go to our regular seat and daven mincha there if the people have already started Kabbalah Shabbos. We stand by the bookcase there on the side to daven mincha that's based on this halacha. According to Isha Yisrael, a contemporary guide to the halacha tefillah, he must recite his mincha outside the synagogue or bechlal outside, right? Imadayin lo kibul lavas Shabbos, afshat tzibur veis hakneses kvar kibul lemas Shabbos, yochol yispal tefillas mincha shel chol, el shbofen ze lo yispalel afilu b'yichudis b'toch beis hakneses asher bo kvar kibul Shabbos. You should actually walk outside from where they're davening. El yitzah chutza yispal sham.
A lot of people, Ernie, people walk into the base of Megdrash a lot of times.
Or walk into the basement, right? Instead of davening on the side there by the Sidurim, which is another practice, you're not within the Kahal there. You go outside, or you're in the base medrash, or you just daven outside. Even 10 people who came late can form a minyan outside for that mincha.
I would probably like that.
He came late, and he was already calculating that by the time they finish, the tzibur finishes mincha, they're going to be makabel Shabbos already. He shouldn't stay in the shul. He can daven inside if you don't have the option to pray outside, because he's davening mincha before the congregation has accepted Shabbos, which remember is Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos. That's why some of us are in the shul, but we stay on the side to daven mincha there. Okay, any comments? Okay, 196. Shir, Kabbalah Shabbos. Although the orders of prayers and songs known as Kabbalat Shabbat, the reception of Shabbat observed today, was compiled and arranged only in the 16th century. More than a millennium before that, some Amoraim were accustomed to reciting a form of Kabbalah Shabbos, as the Gemara Masechta Shabbos tells us. On Kuf Yud Tes, Rav Chanina Ma'ate V'koy Apanya de Mali Shabta. Rav Chanina would wrap in his talis, and he would stand as Shabbos was coming in and say, Bo v'neitze likra Shabbos hamacha. Rav Yanush Lavish Mani Malish, he put on a special garment, like a kapota, and said, Boi chala, boi chala. So this language, this was already their Kabbalah Shabbos. As the Piskei Teshuvos explains, the Kabbalistic authorities of 60th century Tzfat, Rav Yosef Karo was amongst them, crafted a specific formula to be recited at the onset of Shabbos as an expansion of this acceptance of Shabbos mentioned in the Gemara. This formula, which has spread almost universally among the various distinct communities across the world, Sfardim, Ashkenazim, went everywhere, includes reciting specific chapters of Tehillim, 95 to 99, 29, and 92, 93, as well as the liturgical poem L'Chadodi. This poem, using language from the Nevi'im and concepts and allusions from Chazal, was composed by Rav Shlomo Levi Alkabetz, who was one of the leading Kabbalistic authorities in this Tzvat circle. Says the Piskei Teshuvos, Umer Rav Shimon Alkabetz, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, Rabo V'Giso Shel Ramak, the teacher and brother-in-law of Rav Moshe Cordovero, was one of the major Kabbalists. Tikena Piyat L'Chadodi, Hamesayim B'Sofa B'Lashon Chazal, which concludes with those statements that we learn in the Gemara, Boi Chala, Umizmore L'Chun Ranano, in Muskar B'Kisvei Ari V'Ramok, the Ari and Rav Moshe Cordovero don't mention the various L'Chun Ranano, the 6 piyutim of Tehillim that we say before L'Chadodi. They don't mention that. In Muskar B'Kisvei Ari V'Ramak, Ela Hutkan Amiratan Bizman Talmidei Ha'ari. They were composed by the Talmidim of the Ari. And saying these kapitlach became a standard minig throughout Israel. Then Nusach Sfard V'Amiras Kegavna Hutkun Al Yedei Talmidei Abesht. The Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov established Kegavna. Who's called Rishona B'Siddur of Rabbi Asher? It was first mentioned in the Siddur of Rabbi Asher. As is familiar today, the Arizal Rav Yitzchak Luria formalized the practice to recite Tehillim Mizmor LeDavid at the onset of Shabbos. That's the Mizmor that we say right before L'Chadodi. The Gemara already connects that specific chapter of Tehillim to Shabbos. Hani Sheva de Shabbata Keneged Mi. The 7 blessings, we say 7 blessings in every Shemona Esrei on Shabbos. We say the first 3, right? Magen Avos, Mechayim Mesim, and Ata Kadosh. We say the regular last 3, right? The Sechazena Einenu, and then Hatov, and then Sim Shalom. And then the middle bracha, Mekadesh HaShabbos, for Ma'ariv, Shachris, Musaf, and Mincha. So the Amida on Shabbos consists of 7 brachos, not 18 brachos. So this Gemara Masechta Brachos wants to know, where did we come up with this number 7? Amrav Chalalta ben Shol Keneged Shiva Kol Hashem David Elamayim. Kol Hashem B'Koach, Kol Hashem B'Hadar, Kol, right? That, the Mizmor LeDavid that we sing when we walk the Sefer Torah back on Shabbos, it mentions Kol 7 times. And those 7 mentionings serves as the remez for the 7 brachos we make during the Amidah of Shabbos. These voices, the koilos, were heard at the giving of the Torah, which took place on Shabbos. So that's why we mention them on Shabbos. Our Kabbalah Shabbos also includes 2 kapitlach after L'Chadodi. We say Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, and we say Hashem Molech. In his Levush, Rav Mordechai Yaffe explains their respective importance within Psuki de Zimra on Shabbos morning, and this may also explain why they're included in Kabbalah Shabbos on Friday night. Soimchin Acharav, Levush says that after the Lechadodi, we put Mizmor Shalem HaShabbos, which is Tehillim Tzadik Beis. Shugam Ken Odol Hashem Yisbarach. It's a thank to Hashem, ala chasadim d'chsiv, lagid baboker chazdecha, v'achrav Mizmor Hashem molach geis lavish, shu samach leMizmor Shalem HaShabbos. In Tehillim, it's right after. It's Tzadik Gimel. V'hu nidrash al knisas HaShabbos. It's important. This whole kapitel talks about the beginning of Shabbos. Kishasayim HaKadosh Baruch Hu malach toiv, v'nisatev b'tiferes levusho. Hashem finished the work of the 6 days, and he clothed himself with the beauty of his levush. V'yoshav al kisei kodsho. Asher zeh nisyased lakel asher shavas l'chol hamasim. And this is the Birchos Kriya Shema, and the Yisha Yisrael offers some other explanations. Achrei tfilas mincha, minhag lo yomar shisha mizmor. L'chon M'Rabanan kiven she'ela mizmorim hem al yemos HaMashiach. These refer to Messianic times. Shehu Yom Shekula Shabbos. It will be a time where it's always Shabbos. Lahavdil, my partner, retired 3 years ago. And whenever he talks to me on the phone, he says, every day is Sunday. That's what he says to me. Every day is Sunday. We Jews, every day is Shabbos. That means B'mos HaMashiach, every day for us will be like Shabbos. A Mizmor Hashishi, Mizmor LeDavid, which is the Mizmor right before Lechadodi. Yesh bo Shiva Kolos. Keneged Sheva Bracha Shel Tefillah Shabbos. V'yesh noagim sheshlech hatzibur omed b'mokam habima be'es amirs mizmorim eli v'chem b'lchadodi. The bima is in the center of the synagogue, and we know the minig that the chazan for lechadodi is in the center of the synagogue where the Torah is read. And according to Ashkenazic custom, the chazan generally stands at a different point towards the front of the synagogue, except for certain instances that may not be defined as actual tefillah, which is Kabbalah Shabbos. General Sephardic custom, the chazan always stands at the beam in the middle of the synagogue. But Ashkenazim, we go to the front. So, but Kabbalah Shabbos, we do at the middle bima. So I'm back in the Isha Yisrael. Amam bavudram uv'machzor vitri lo muskar loymar shisha mizmor meid. The Avudram was an early Rishon who also had a sitter and a machzor, and we base a lot of our tefillos on the Avudram and this machzor vitri, which is an early machzor. We don't find these mizmorim. That's what we said before, that the practice to recite these 6 mizmorim came in the 1500s. And the Avudram and the Machzor Vitri is from the year 1100, 1200. There was no Kabbalah Shabbos as we know it then. I consider Beis Yaakov, the Rav Yaakov ben, to the Yaivitz, Rav Yaakov Emden. Let's just make sure everybody knows who we're talking about. The mid-1700s, a huge gadol, Rav Yaakov Emden, he was the son of the Chacham Tzvi. Chacham Tzvi was in the late 1600s. He dealt with a famous tshuva on a chicken that was born without a heart. He also talked about whether you could count a goylem and a minion. That's a famous shayla of the Chacham Tzvi. So the son of the Chacham Tzvi was Yaakov Emden. And Yaakov Emden was in a huge machlokas with Rav Yonasan Eibshitz, who Rav Yaakov Emden felt was a Sabbatian, somebody who followed Shabtai Tzvi. He was making amulets, so that, and then the whole Jewish world was in a conflict. Some people followed Rav Yaakov Emden, some people held with Rav and Eibschitz.
I think J.J. Schechter wrote a whole book on it, sefer on it.
J.J. Schechter's PhD dissertation
Right.
was on Rav Yaakov Emden. And the whole notion over the last 50 years, remember, J.J. Schechter is probably 10, if not 15 years older than Professor Mark Shapiro. If you notice, what did Mark Shapiro write about? His thesis was on the Sridei Eish, Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, which became his first famous book. This whole concept of academic scholarly dissertations being written on Gedolim, so J.J. Schechter was under the tutelage of Professor Tversky, who was the Talner Rav, the son-in-law of Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik in Boston. So he was the dean of Jewish history. There's only 4 people that I know that received their PhD from Rabbi Tversky. That's J.J. Schechter. There's Rabbi David Berger, Professor David Berger, who's in, I think, Brooklyn College. Yaakov might know. Mark Shapiro. Yeah. Huh?
Wasn't he the dean at Revel for many years?
David Berger?
Yeah. Yes, I'm pretty sure.
But David Berger was the one who wrote the book about the Mashiach, the Messianism of the Lubavitcher. But anyways, I bring this up that Jewish history took a turn. It became acceptable to, if you wrote a scholarly work and on a great gadol, Chassam Sofer, the Noda B'Yehuda, and this became common practice. If you go to Bar Ilan or other Judaic places where they give you a PhD, so this is often, and then eventually it becomes a book that they write. So like Mark Shapiro, that was his dissertation. And then his first famous book was about the Sridei Eish. And it's absolutely correct. Whoever said that J.J. Schechter wrote about Yaakov Emden, that was his actual thesis. Yes?
I got a copy of his thesis from, I think it was University Microfilms. If you read any of the books that J.J. Schechter wrote, it always says, author of a forthcoming biography of Rav Yaakov Emden. Well, he never published that biography. So I met him,
but it was, Jacob, it was his dissertation, right?
It was definitely his dissertation.
But he never, so he never published
it. He never
that.
published it. But if you read, he wrote a number of books, and always on the jacket of the book it says author of forthcoming biography of Rav Yaakov Emden. Well, that biography never forthcame, and I asked him why. I had a pretty good idea, and he said he just couldn't publish it because it was too explosive. Rav Yaakov Emden was quite an interesting character. He also wrote an autobiography, and if you read J.J. Schachter's biography, it's all in there. He had sexual issues. He was attracted to. I mean, he was a gadol, but he was attracted to a younger woman. Never acted on it, but he just felt he couldn't publish it. So if you look at his early books, you'll see that reference, but in fact, it was never published. The biography of Rav Yaakov Emden.
But I thought what was interesting is the trend in scholarly academia to focus scholarship on these great rabbinic figures. And that began, I think Rabbi Tversky was an impetus to this, So
yeah, he wrote on the Ramban. His famous work was on the Ramban, Rabbi Tversky.
The professor, the dean, the one who taught everybody.
Right, on the Ramban, yeah.
Okay, so Rav Yaakov Emden had a Siddur Beis Yaakov who says that his father, the Chacham Tzvi, Hayal Adchil b'mizmor l'David havu l'Hashem. Now, Rav Yaakov Emden lived way after the scholars in Tzfat, but he says the Chacham Tzvi only started from Mizmor l'David. The Omnam b'Seder Hayom, Kosav Loimer Elo Hashisha Mizmor. But when he wrote what should you do, he said you should say the 6 Mizmor. Then the Gra the Siddur Agra, b'shem Siddur Rashban, l'Rav Shlomo Tzvi Shik ben Nosson, shemizmor melu keneged sheish tkiyot shetiknu chachmei Talmud b'Bavel. We learned already before that there was a practice in Bavel to blow 6 blasts before Shabbos. And the people did certain things. The 3rd blast, they closed their stores. The 4th blast, they made sure to light candles. Whatever, the Gemara there goes through what was done by the 6 blasts. So very interesting. He says that the 6 mizmorim that we say were misakein opposite those 6 blasts that used to be done before Shabbos. The government required them, they can't do the blasts anymore. Of course, there's also the minig to say right before Lachadodi, the Ana B'Koach, which the abbreviations spell out the 42-letter name of Hashem. Hashem has, of course, a four-letter name, the Shem al-Mufarish, and then there's a 42, Shem ben Men Bezois, Kabbalistic wise, and those are the remez there is by Ana B'Koach. The Shulchan Aruch records an old custom to recite Bameh Madlikin, the 2nd chapter of Mishnah Masechtas Shabbos, and that should be recited before Ma'ariv. This chapter deals primarily with halachas of Shabbos candles and other halachas relevant to the onset of Shabbos. Here, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, you notice it's Siman Reish Ayin, Siman 270. But because we don't want to have a Siman that's called Ra, Reish Ayin, they call it Siman Ayin Reish. Look in your Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that as they count the Simonim, to avoid a bad word, Ra, they call it air. Ayin Reish. Harold, we're on page 199. Talking about Kabbalah Shabbos. Noyagim loymar perek b'meh madlikin. Ve'asfardim oimru so kodim tfilas arvis. V'hu anachon. They don't even say b'meh madlik. The Sfardim, the Nusach Sfard says kegavna. Yesh shein omrim also b'yontiv shechalios perev Shabbos. But when yontiv falls on Friday, we don't say b'meh madlikin. Yesh shein omrim also b'Shabbos shel Chanukah. Some say Shabbos Chanukah, we don't say b'meh madlikin. The reason is that on Yontif, one should not ask his household whether they separated the tithes, as mentioned in this chapter, since it's forbidden. It's also not recited when Yontif falls on Shabbos or Friday night of Chol HaMoed, due to the principle of lo plug, not distinguishing between similar cases to prevent confusion. Because if you did it that Shabbos, you'd be confused on another Shabbos. What does the Ramah say? The ein noagin came b'Chanukah v'Shabbos shel Chol HaMoed, ein omrim oso. We do not omit Bameh Madlikin on Chanukah. We say Bameh Madlikin Shabbos Chanukah. But Shabbos Chol HaMoed, we don't say it. If the Yontif is actually Shabbos, we go right into Ma'ariv and Emrim so as well. Okay. Page 201. Ma'ariv. The Ma'ariv we recite on Friday night differs from the weekday Ma'ariv. Aside from a distinct Shabbos Amidah, these differences include a modification of Hashkivenu, right? The final bracha of Birchos Kriyas Shema. We insert the verses of Ishamru. There's a unique bracha modeled after the Amidah referred to as the bracha Me'in Sheva, right? We start a bracha right after Vaychulu. We start a bracha, Magen Avot, and then we go into Magen Avot, and we say like a little kiddush there. And it's structured like the 7 brachos of the Shabbos Amidah. And according to certain times, we say Mizmor LeDavid, Hashem Roi, Psalm 23. That's Nusach Sfard. So Hashkivenu. The tour explains different practices regarding the change in Hashkivenu, as well as the practice to recite the verses of a Shabbat. Says the tour. He says one of the difference in the Ma'ariv of Friday night is Mishanin b'chasima shechoiseh. We change the normal. Normally we say Baruch Atah Hashem Shomer Amo Yisrael Lo'ad. That's what we said tonight. But on Shabbos we say Apoirei Sukkah Shalom, right? Apoirei Sukkah Shalom Aleinu. We change the chasima there. We say Uporei Sukkah Shalom Aleinu V'Yushalayim Ircha. Baruch Atah Hashem Aporei Sukkah Shalom Aleinu V'Amo Yisrael V'Yushalayim. V'cheina minhag Ashkenaz, Germany, uVitzarfat, and in France. Vein choismin shomer amo Yisrael oad. We don't conclude the Hashkivenu with the regular conclusion. What is the brach of Hashkivenu? It's at night. There are demons at night. Night is a place of danger. So Hashkivenu, we ask Hashem, allow us to go to sleep at night and watch over us. Oyev, Dever, Cherev, Rab, right? Shomer Amo Yisrael, and he is our watchman. But on Shabbos, we don't need the Shmirah. The Shabbos is the Shmirah. So that, we should just have that in mind. When we daven Friday night, we recognize there's a difference between tonight and regular Friday night, regular nights. V'it no'agim loymar pasuk v'shamru b'nei Yisrael sa Shabbos. Loymar, Shim Yishmeru Shabbos and Tzrichim Shmira. It goes together. That means we just finished saying, oh, we're going to have a shalom. We don't need Shmira. Well, why are we zoicha to that? That's if we're Shomer Shabbos. It's also that it's actually a tefillah for geula, because we know the Chazal, She'im Yishmeru Yisrael Beit Shabbos Miyad Migalim. The Mashiach will come if Klal Yisrael would do to remember in the desert when the man fell. So the pasuk there testifies the first time people did go out on Shabbos to take the man, but then they were chastised. The next week it says they observed the Shabbos and nobody went out. But that was only one Shabbos. They weren't able to put two together. If we had two together, Mashiach would have come even then. The Omer, Shliach Tzibur Kaddish, right? After the Vishamru, the Chazan says Kaddish, and it's following Arvis. Then he says Uet Toledo, but he calls it Tolitula, right? Tolitula was the name, the Hebrew name of Toledo. Yaakov and I were in Toledo in Spain with Mark. Toledo was the city of the Rosh. The Rosh lived in Toledo. And of course, the tour is Yaakov ben Arosh. So it makes sense that the tour is writing about something that happened in Toledo because his family lived in Toledo. Toledo's a beautiful walled city up high on a mountain. You enter in it with these massive escalators to get up there because it would be very, very hard to go. And then walking around is very high. It's a beautiful city. Uvitolatilo, nagin lachton b'Shabbos kemo b'chol. They didn't have this practice of switching the end. Ve'eno nachon, but it's not correct. In Yerushalayim, Garsina b'dei hada the tamer b'chol of b'Shabbos oimer fos leinu sukkah shlometh. In Yerushalmi, it says Shomer Amo Yisrael Ad for weeknights, but Shabbos we should say Ufros Aleinu Sukkah Shalom. And that's the tour. So the Shulchan Aruch confirms that the conclusion of Hashkivenu is distinct on Shabbos. Beverchas Hashkivenu Eina Chosim B'Shem Yisrael Ad L'Kivan Shigia Lu uvitzel knafecha tastirenu, Omer. Ufros sukat shalom aleinu v'Yerushalayim yircha. Baruch atah Hashem. Apor sukat shalom aleinu kol Am Yisrael v'Yerushalayim. The Mishnah Berurah writes that if one made a mistake and you concluded Shomer Am Yisrael la'ad, the usual conclusion, the halacha depends how soon afterwards you realize your mistake. Im shachach v'omer Shomer Am Yisrael la'ad, instead of tachas apor sukat shalom, im nizkar toch kedei dibur. If you remembered before the toch kedei dibur is usually to mean shalom aleichem Rebbe, that amount of time, shalom aleichem Rebbe. But within the time within you said the words. Im nisbach toch kedei dibur yomer miyad achar tevis la'ad hapoyres. That means Hashem Yisrael la'ad. Oh, I forgot. Hapoyres sukat shalom. You can conclude there. Here it comes. If the delay was more than the time it takes you to say Shalom Aleichem Moiri Rabbi, very short time. You don't have to say go back or Frosalenu and whatever you said works. Let's look at the footnote on the bottom of page 201. The Tur is compelled to explain how the verses that they mentioned were related to Geula in order to justify reciting them in this place in the Tefillah, because the Gemara states that we must juxtapose Geula and the Amida, right? Goal Yisrael, and also at night. However, some congregations, particularly Yerushalayim, conform to the custom of the Vilna Gaon, of that of Chabad, to refrain from reciting all verses between the end of Ashkevenu and the Amida, due to the concern that these may indeed be interrupting between the Gula and the Tefillah. So they don't say V'shamru. They go right into Kaddish. Now, what about the Amida and the Vayichulu afterwards? We mentioned that the Amida of Shabbos includes 7 brachos in place of the 19 recited during the week. Of these 7, the first 3 and the last 3 are the standard brachos. The middle bracha is Mekadesh HaShabbos, which relates to the sanctity of Shabbos. On Shabbos night, this bracha includes verses from the account of Shabbos during the week of creation called Shabbos Bereishis. And the Gemara explains the significance of reciting these verses. Amar Rava v'tem Rav Shua ben Levi. Afilu yachid hamitzpal b'erev Shabbos. Even you're not with a minyan, you're davening by yourself. Friday night, tzarich lo emer vaychulu. Damar v'avnuna kol hamitzpal b'erev Shabbos v'omer vaychulu malal v'kosov kilu nasa shutu v'kadosh baruch hu b'meiser bereishis. When you daven Friday night and you say vaychulu, l'chora, the Vayichulu in the Amida we're talking about, within your Shemona Esrei, Hashem views you as a partner in the creation of the world. Shenemar Vayichulu, al tikra Vayichulu, Shenemar Vayichalu, al tikra Vayichalu, ela Vayichulu. So not as the Bria was finished, but they finished. Now, after the silent Shemon Esrei, we say Vayichulu again, as the Rosh explains. Umasha oimer achar atfila, the Vayichulu afal pisha kvar amra b'toch atfila. You already said Vayichulu in Shemon Esrei. Here's the reason. Mishum t'shechalios yontav b'Shabbos. Let's say Sukkot or Pesach or Rosh Hashanah is going to start on Shabbos, then you don't say Vaychulu, because you said a yontif davening. In order for us not to be confused, we say it every Shabbos. So that's the reason why we say Vaychulu again. Because on Yontif, you're not going to be say Vaychulu in your Shemona Esrei. So we say it afterwards. The Shulchan Aruch adds another reason. Namely, on some occasions, one does not recite it within the Amidah. The Shulchan Aruch also writes how it is to be recited. Like we said, like the Rosh said. The other reason that the Vaychulu is said by the Chazan afterwards, for the people who don't know how to read Hebrew. You say it standing. As the Taz writes, Vaychulu is to be recited while standing because it's a testimony. Accordingly, as stated in the Tur, even if someone finishes his silent Shemona Esrei after the congregation has already recited Vaychulu, you should go up to your friend and you should say it with another person because testimony demands at least two people. Nonetheless, the Taz maintains that it may be recited by an individual, even if he does so without intending it as testimony. We learned this when we learned the COVID, when we had all those shiurim on COVID, and we were all davening by ourselves at home. We learned that you can be yotzi even if you're not saying the Vaychulu with two people. I don't know if some of you remember that, but I remember teaching that. The Taz, in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, says, we are giving testimony that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. V'dina Eidim B'Amida. When Eidim are in Bezdin giving testimony, they have to stand up. And and witnesses should recite their testimony together. An individual prays alone doesn't repeat Vaychulu after Shemona Esrei because there's no edus for a yachid. The edus shlema be'inin la'ayid like HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'aynu asara, and you need a full tzibur like a minyan. But v'myirtze yachid la'omer lo yiskaven l'shem edus. However, if the yachid can say it, he can say it, but he shouldn't have kavana that it's al edus. Elakakar b'torah, it's like reading psukim because they are psukim. Kain nira la niyas daiti. So says the Taz. The Mishnah Berurah clarifies that functioning as a testimony, at least two people should recite Vaychulu together. With regard to an individual, he notes that the matter is disputed by the poskim, though he concludes that one may recite it alone as reading from the Torah, which is similar to what the Taz said. I'll call ponim yebishnayim. Try to do it with two. He's referring to the Taz that if a person davened at home by himself, and he said Vaychulu in his Shemona Esrei, he doesn't have to repeat it afterwards. The Yachal can say it. When he says it then, he doesn't have to stand. The Mishnah Berurah concludes and says, it's a good idea for the Yachal to do it, but he should have kavod not l'shem edus, elakakar b'torah, like what the Rosh said. As we saw in the Taz, ideally one should recite Vaychulu together with the entire tzibur. The Bir Halacha, which is the Mishnah Berurah, writes, citing the Pri Megadim, that due to the importance of reciting Vaychulu with the congregation, a person should hurry his silent Shemona Esrei Friday night so he can make sure he finishes, so he can recite the Vaychulu with the congregation. Whoever is davening their silent Shemona Esrei should finish quickly. That's what the Pri Megadim says. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes that if someone has concluded the final bracha of the personal Amida and is about to recite the Elokai Netzor, you can, and you said you Ratzoni Mefi, so you can recite Vaychulu with the congregation after Amavarech Samo Yisrael Bashalom. The B'Shabbos Kayom, Shebamiras Vachilu Hi Chelik Me'atfila. Vaychulu is actually inserted into the Shmona Esrei. So, Afshadayin Lo'oka Raglav, Laiman Amiloimar, Otpam Yachadim Atzipur. As long as he hasn't taken his 3 steps back, he should say Vaychulu with the Tzibur if he hasn't taken his 3 steps back. The Or L'Tzion states that one need not hurry or interrupt his silent meter for this. In his view, the primary motivation for saying Vaychulu is not testimony, but for those instances when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos and Atav V'Chartanu is recited, there's no Vaychulu. Therefore, one need not to be concerned to find a second person with whom to recite Vaychulu, and there's no reason to rush to recite it with the congregation. That's the main reason, because of the fact that Vaychulu isn't said on Yom Tov. We wouldn't have to repeat it if it wasn't for this problem. So you could say it by yourself. You recite tefillas on Yom Tov even by yourself. You can't even give testimony at night. Beis Din didn't operate at night. There's no edus. You don't have to cite it together. You don't have to look for other person to say it with you. You certainly shouldn't rush your davening. And the Chazon Ish agrees that the Vaychulu functions not as a true personal testimony, but as the congregation's declaration that in 6 days Hashem made heaven and earth. Accordingly, he argues that the testament aspect applies when the whole congregation recites it, but not when a solitary person merely repeats it together with the second individual. On the contrary, saying it with 2 people is objectionable, as it gives the impression that the person is attempting to formally testify. We don't do it at night, we don't do it on Shabbos. Let's learn this Chazon Ish. Tur Siman Reish Sameches, Yesh Oimim, Shenagu Loimer also B'Kol Ramu Me'umin, that the Vaychulu should be said standing and in a loud voice. Nira, Del Haisvar Enot Tzarech L'Tam, Shekosva Tosfos Varosh. Excuse me. That the reason given by the Tosfos and the Rosh about Yontif, the Nogul Omer Achar Tefillah Mishum Shabbat Shel Yontif, Elo Omer Also Kol HaTzibur Yachad B'Kol Ram. The Tzibur says it together. V'zeu ki ilu machrizu me'idin b'fnei kol bai olam. It's like the Tzibur is testifying to the whole world. Ki sheishes v'masar Hashem, it's Shemai v'saretz, v'yarach v'mashvi. V'ad b'inin yachad b'zeh ikei keru. When you say it together, a whole Tzibur, there's a heker, Persume Milsa, it's like Persume Nisa. V'chein kol rama mu'ulet. V'nira. Delatam zena yachid koifel v'echulu. If you're at home davening by yourself, the Chazon Ish says, you don't have to repeat Vaychulu. The b'yachid leka rak kol ram. You only have the aspect of reciting the Vaychulu with sound, because during Shemona Esrei you were silent. Shebet Tefillah v'Balacha. So because of that one aspect by itself, we should zelachud. So maybe you don't have to repeat it. Now, if it's Yontif, we didn't say Vaychulu, even a Yochid should repeat it. Even to the Shabbat Shel Yontif, Omra Achar Tefillah. Maybe Shabbat Shel Yontif, Ava Yachid Omro. So a Yochid davens that Shmona Esrei Yontif, Mishum Shuchov Lo Omro. Bina Yochid HaMispalel, if a private individual is davening at home, or Shesayim Tefillah, so Achar Shamrat Tzibur Vaychulu, or he was a straggler, his Shmona Esrei took time, and the Tzibur has already finished Vaychulu. His Vaychulu is the reason for a low plug. The fact that on Shabbos Yontif we don't say it, in the Shmona Esrei we have to say it after, we do it every Shabbos. So maybe the Yachi doesn't have to do it with a full voice and can sit. לא מצינו זה בפויסקים, אין לו לחדש דבר. וכן ויכלו שומר על הכוס לא ציב לביסו. He is going to recite Vaychulu when he comes home and fulfill his family's obligation to hear Kiddush. I don't know what he means here, whether he doesn't have to do it B'Kol Ram and standing. So too with the Vaychul that he recites as part of Kiddush and a cup of wine. Or he's going to say it again. I'm not sure what the Chazon Ish means here. He says, he concludes, he says, you don't have to run after the second person. In fact, you shouldn't do it. Nonetheless, despite the arguments against an individual actively trying to recite Vaychul together with another, the Piskei Teshuvos writes that the custom is spread to recite it in pairs, like the Mishnah Berurah. Even the Nafik Nipume da Mishnah Berurah Nispashid Aminig Ladaralka. He says once the Mishnah Berurah said we should look for another person to do it with us, that's the minig. Mikol Makom Kishe'en Lo Tzirif Od Echad. Now, if he can't find another person, the private person does say it, but he stands up. He says it with full voice. But you shouldn't have kavanah for edus elakakor b'tor. Okay, we're going to leave the bracha me'in sheva, the Magen Avos bracha for next week. Any questions, comments, or oros? Okay, have a good shot, good chodesh, everybody. Chodesh, and we'll see everybody. Good Shabbos. We'll see everybody on Tuesday night, next Tuesday night again.
Okay.
Tomorrow Daf Yomi is at 8:00.